Hello and welcome to my demographic report, written for working with diverse and exceptional learners. I'm Ann David. Hello, Sean, and I hope you look forward to seeing what I put together for you. Please note I'm recovering from a pretty bad cold, so if I pause periodically, just forgive me while I go and recover. Let's start out with a look at my school and our community. I teach in Garden City, Kansas. I teach 7th grade mathematics. And a quick look at our community demographics for our population of a little more than 26,000 shows that more than half of our population here in Garden City identifies as Hispanic or Latino. White and Caucasian people make up the next largest segment, and then that's followed by mostly our Asian community, which is split between Vietnamese, Burmese, Thai, and Cantonese. Our Black and African American population identifies mostly as Somali, and then we have a smattering of Pacific Islanders, Native Americans, and other populations. About 8,000 students, actually a little less than 8,000 students are enrolled in our public school system. That's made up of 11 elementary schools, 2 intermediate centers, which teach grades 5 and 6, 2 middle schools, which teach grades 7 and 8, 1 high school, and then 1 alternative education center. Our annual school budget is approximately $13,000 per student, with approximately $8,000 of that spent on student instruction and support services. I should note that a fair amount, larger than I expected, of our annual budget goes to capital projects. We have a brand new high school, and we spend a fair amount of money refitting buildings and keeping them maintained based on the age of our buildings here in Garden City. A look at our student background, and what I've done here is I've recast the community demographics to compare it to a pie chart of our student demographics. As noted, a little bit more than half of our community population identifies as Hispanic or Latino. In my particular building, that's nearly 75%. And that's reflective of the geographic location of our school. Most of the white Caucasian students go to a different middle school. That's because of geographic boundaries. So we shoulder a disproportionate share of the Hispanic and Latino population, and nearly all of the Black, African American, Asian, and other minority populations. Here at Horace J. Good Middle School, we have 2 grades, 7 and 8, about 756 students ranging in ages from 11 to 14. We have 2 90-minute sessions per day for our core classes. Our ELA classes go for 90 minutes straight. Our mathematics classes are split into 2 45-minute sessions, 1 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. We do that because of information we've gathered about how the brain learns mathematics, and studies show that having some time to learn new content and then rest and come back later in the afternoon to practice those skills actually increases the amount of mathematical learning that gets converted to long-term learning. We have 7 in-building administrators and a team of 18 in-building student support and counseling professionals. They provide all of the in-class instructional support and resources needed to support our IEP, ILP, SAT, and ELL learners. And also what I haven't noticed is we have a fair amount of district support that rotates through our buildings, providing translation and additional counseling support. Okay, when we look at our student profiles, we see what I've done on one side is I've compared race and ethnicity to some of our socioeconomic factors. And you can see that English language learners comprise about 47% of our student population. Although we believe this is likely underreported, our placement for ELL status is dependent on parents declaring that the language spoken at home is something other than English. And we believe, through experience and through community contacts, that a lot of parents don't actually report that, and consequently not every student who probably would normally qualify for ELL support services is currently flagged to receive those. So that provides an interesting challenge in the classroom as we work to provide all of the students who need those supports with exactly what it is they need. And I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail when we get into educational options. The languages spoken in our community are vast. They include but are not limited to Arabic, Burmese, Cantonese, French, German, Hindi, Hmong, Italian, Karen, Korean, Russian, Spanish, Somali, Tagalog, Vietnamese, and of course English. All in all, there are 26 languages spoken in our district. I have noted on the graph migrant status students. About 10% of our student population is flagged as migrant, and that poses some interesting challenges that we try to address by providing online resources for learning, in that these students can be gone for really long lengths of time. Let's look at student academic performance. Disappointingly, we perform below the state average in almost all categories. This information is based on the Kansas Assessment Portfolio. And for mathematics, we score below the statewide student averages. As you can see, the students performing in levels 1 and 2 are greater than those lower level performance averages statewide. And the students we have performing in the higher tiers, levels 3 and 4, are less than what most districts see across the state. Over time, our building is showing a decrease in students who are performing at these lower 1 and 2 levels, with corresponding increases at the higher levels of 3 and 4. But as you can see from the bar graph, we have a lot of ground to make up. In ELA, they're seeing similar kind of performance statistics. We have a greater number of students performing at levels 1 and 2 than the statewide averages, and a lesser number of students performing at the higher levels 3 and 4. Oddly, however, over time, in ELA, levels 1 and 4 are decreasing, meaning our most proficient language learners and our least proficient English speakers are decreasing, while we see more students filling up the middle tier categories. I think this is reflective of the fact that some of our lower level English language learners are growing up within the system and becoming more competent as some of our white students go to a different middle school. In history, government, and social studies, the trend continues. Again, we have a greater number of students performing at the lower tiers and fewer students performing at the higher levels. It's important to note that for social studies, though, our district currently is tracking only 1 year of data, so I have no multi-year trend analysis for that. And this information is provided to us through KITE. Like social studies, science assessment data also shows that level 1 and 2 students are performing, and we have a greater number of students performing at those levels, with fewer students performing at the higher levels. And again, like social studies, this reflects only 1 year of data. So all in all, our district is a little bit behind the curve when compared to state averages. And we try and make as many accommodations to the curriculum and to our instructional methods as possible to account for the disparity, the cultural diversity, the disparity in performance, and still meet the needs of the students who are performing at level 3 and level 4. Okay, so how exactly do we go about meeting the needs of those students? I'm pleased to say that our district does an excellent job of adhering to the state's recommended multi-tiered support system. For needs and assessment, our lowest performing ELA and math students, as identified by CAP, are placed in intervention classes. Those are the level 1 students, and this gives them an additional 30 minutes of differentiated instruction each time every day. Our district assessment system, Illuminate, lets me and other teachers and counselors identify our level 2 and level 4 students who don't have an opportunity for this additional 30 minutes of instruction, but who can be identified by teachers and then provided with individual instruction time for level 2 students to help them get up to grade level, and for level 4 students to offer them that extension or more challenging work that they need to keep advancing at a pace that meets their needs. In the classroom itself, my math level 1 and level 2 students, level 1 kids, of course, meet with me for an extra 30 minutes of intervention time. But in the mainstream class itself, level 1 and 2 students experience more small group time. They have a lot of hands-on exercises that I've planned out to provide them with more scaffolded learning. And I also use that time to increase the frequency of manipulatives and concrete examples to help them get from concrete to visual. Oftentimes what I'm seeing with these students is they're not quite ready to get to the level of abstraction that some of my higher performing students are, and they benefit from this small group time to kind of build those skills a little more quickly. Students performing at level 4, I usually challenge with project-based activities that allow them to do more discovery or exploration-based learning with real-world applications. When possible, we try and seat them in advanced math classes here in the district, but due to a shortage of math teachers, those positions are pretty limited, and consequently the burden for keeping my highest level performers challenged falls on our classroom time. I do provide online learning extensions that help support the multi-tier support system. They're selected according to student needs. Illuminate helps me identify by standard which students need what, and I can assign, using Shobi, I can assign students to groups, and for those groups provide both them and their parents with opportunities in the classroom and outside of the classroom to get extra resources, extra targeted materials that will help them practice or re-explain what we've learned in class. All students, regardless of their level, are provided with these flipped classroom materials. So not only, we don't have one-to-one iPads yet. I wish we do. We're supposed to get them later in the year. But they do get some class time rotating through the iPads that we have that allow them to access these flipped and targeted materials in class, the multimedia materials. Most importantly, it lets them get that material at home, either in their learning groups, which I'll talk more about in a minute, or as they work individually or with their parents. For our English language students, they are identified, as I noted earlier, by parent declaration. And we expect that not all of the parents report the need for ELL services or request them. And consequently, we end up extending those services to a greater number of students than our system actually flags. Our building does that by encouraging educators to do that on a class-by-class basis, regardless of how the system flags or identifies it. So our in-class resources and our paraprofessionals really spend a lot of time not only with the students that are assigned to them, but with other students in the class. In the classroom itself, we have a class within a class support, CWC, which is designed to provide the students who are flagged with in-class native language supports, cultural interpretation, and additional instruction and testing time outside of the class. It does that by providing these students with 43 additional minutes of instructional time every day, where they work with their CWC teachers and their peers to go over the material that was covered earlier in the day. In the class itself, the CWC professionals and our paraprofessionals, we use them to do a lot of small group work to provide, and with these small groups let them work in their native language. And it also allows the ELL students to work together and with me to read, interpret, and rephrase the work. This gives us an opportunity to expand vocabulary and expand cultural experience as well. A lot of the materials we work with are not particularly culturally relevant, and I'll talk about those adaptations in a second. Finally, in terms of testing accommodations, we allow extended test time and read aloud support in all of our classrooms. The CWC students do get to use their extra tutorial time to extend testing time and to get additional supports. But pretty much across the board, all teachers realize in our school that more than nearly 3/4 of our population needs that extra time to just simply cope with the language curve.